I grew up in Carrickfergus, which is about 10 miles from Belfast, with my stepmother, my father, and in the house in the middle of the three that we all lived in. I had about 10 cousins. I started school very early in Northern Ireland. So yeah, I remember 4. It was St Nicholas's Catholic, public elementary school, very close to where I lived. In fact, I walked to school every morning with my cousins. My father was demobbed from the Navy after he lost his wife and two daughters, and the Germans missed me. So I survived. They all died. My dad got out of the Navy and went to work at the shipyard from Carrickfergus. But I remember my 2 sisters, must have been, well, obviously before they were killed, but we were all hiding in below a table, which is what people did, thinking it would keep them alive. And what I can remember about them was they had tartan skirts on with the big pins in them, which people used to have as an adornment. When we moved to Carrick, my father came out of the Navy, came to pick me up from my grandmother's and took me around to live with one of his sisters, a spinster. And I went to live with this aunt. She wasn't married, no children. And stayed there until my father remarried about a year later, and I went to Carrick. I say Carrick, it's Carrickfergus, but it got Carrick. And that was it. I stayed there until the 45, I think. Moved up to Belfast to live in the old house that we had been bombed out of. But it was rebuilt. Yeah. The whole street was rebuilt. And I lived there with my father, my stepmother, and all of my own. No sisters, no brothers, no cousins. I still saw them, because Carrick is only 10 miles from Greencastle, where the house was. The sand shoes were always white. Maybe they were black. They were black and white. And everybody had a pair of sand shoes. You may have had them. I may have had them for school when we did PE, which was nothing more than standing out in the playground and jumping around, throwing your legs about. Mm-hmm. That was... And they had a better edition of sand shoes, which were always the same colour. They were like a brownish colour, but they were like booties. They had boots shape and the boots look about them, but they were laced up, same as an ordinary pair of boots would be. Yeah. We wore boots in those days, even instead of shoes. You wouldn't see boys of 5 or 6 nowadays wearing lace-up boots unless they're playing football. And even then they're not laced up, they're velcroed across. But the sand shoes turned into shoes. I don't know where the name came from. Mutton dummies, they were called. Mutton dummies. Dumb sheep. They saw me through my sports days. Mutton dummies, I don't know. Ireland has a language that the strangers do not know. There's lots of things that have names, and you can be totally befuddled by them. All the boys wore long grey socks. You only had short ankle socks on in the summer, all white. That showed you that spring was over and the summer was in. And of course you didn't wear your mutton dummies with the ankle socks on, because the boots came right up your foot over the ankle bone. Just like a pair of boots. Canvas shoes, yeah. Same. But Ireland has always been troubled. There's always been divisions between the religions. It's not political. I suppose basically it's political, but it's Catholics against Protestants. But it was only almost a seasonal thing. 12th of July came, which was Orangeman's Day, and all the boys in the street that I normally played with would stay at their end of the street, which was almost separated into two, Catholics and Protestants. But they would stay in their group of boys and I would stay with mine, and then the 13th of July would come, or the 14th, and we'd all be back again playing together. No animosity, no stones being thrown. If I didn't have sandals on, they were also very popular, brown sandals with all the fancy work, showing the toes. No, I don't think measuring feet was a thing then. The IRA on the Republican side were always in the background, but there were never bombings or serious killings or assassinations that I can remember. In 1960 or thereabout, that they started to come to the fore, and they've progressed ever since then. But they've stopped again. There's no animosity of any great moment. The old sores are still there. They'll never really heal. Yeah, people seem to get on. I mean, my neighbours were non-Catholics, and they were the best neighbours you could find. And the next house was a grandmother and her husband of a lad who lived in the other end of the street, who was a Catholic. And then there was the rest of the row, which was about 4 or 5 houses, were all non-Catholic. But there was never, people never showed any animosity to my stepmother and me because we were Catholic. And we didn't hide it. We didn't flaunt it, but we didn't hide it. So we just got on with life. Our end of the street, there were probably more Catholic families and came to live over in England. And I went back there. And that's when I started to go into amateur dramatics. But I was going to a rehearsal one night on the Antrim Road, which was 15, 20 minutes drive from where I lived. And I parked the car outside a friend's shop and walked towards the clubhouse, which was just an ordinary house in a row. And someone came up behind me and said, I heard him calling out somebody's name. And it wasn't my name, so I just ignored him. And the person that I thought he was shouting at, I said to him, he's calling your name. He's called somebody calling you. He said, they're not calling me. So by that time, the person had come up beside me and was standing about 3 or 4 feet away. Tommy or something. I said, my name's not Jimmy or Tommy. So he just looked at me and he had his hand inside his... All these things afterwards made it look more perhaps dangerous than I assessed at the time. He had his hand inside his pocket, right hand. And I said, my name's not Jimmy or Tommy, or whatever it was he was calling. So he said, oh, okay, and turned and ran off back down the Antrim Road in the direction of where my friend's shop was. And I just assumed later, when I thought about it, that I could have been somebody that he'd mistaken, because an awful lot of people died, shot, because it was a mistaken identity. Somebody said, that's him. And the gunman just wanted to get it over with, probably, and just opened fire on them. But I think, on the most part, they would recognise.
Yeah, everybody wore sandals. Everybody wore sandals to school for the summer. They had to be decent, but everyone wore sandals. That was standard wear before things like trainers or anything came in. Then you went from sandals to shoes, lace-up shoes for the winter. He'd be about 12 or 13. That was coming into the 80s. when everything started to be brand conscious. Before that, everything more or less was functional. But for normal wear, it was always just sandals in the summer, lace-up shoes in the winter, because everything was geared to school.
Yeah.
And there was very little in the way of leisure shoes, you know.
But it was the kids who dictated fashion, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, Jamie would say, or maybe Maura would say, all my friends have got...
Yeah.
And you'd go out and buy it for her to keep her happy. Maura said it the way it was.
Before that, it was whatever fitted the purpose of what you were doing.
Yeah.
No matter who made it.
And this, I remember him with his Lacoste shirts.
Yeah.
Cutting out the alligator and sticking them onto his t-shirts, and the labels.
But that was, you know, he'd be about 13 even before he became aware. He became aware of that. Doing that, he became so conscious and wearing pink. Pink. Nobody wore pink if you were a boy, but he did. That was the thing. But everything was functional before that. There was
so I'm just trying to figure out what it was that
triggered that. Well, the thing I remember only, you know, from sportswear was what you wore for tennis, and it was always green flash. Your sand shoes had to be green flash because they were just a little bit better than what you might buy in Tesco's or Asda or something, which were probably the same, but green flash was okay. That was the standard at the time, green flash, and they were just really basic. But football boots used to be plain old black and white, and they still were, even when you stopped playing or at school, there were still, all these coloured boots didn't come in until the current. Adidas was always very big for football boots, and that and the sports industry just suddenly taking off, and I mean, and it's never stopped, has it?
So this is probably 85.
Yeah, in the definitely
Around about that
80s.
time.
In my recollection, it would be when everything started being branding. Even things like socks became, you know, you had to have certain socks and whatnot. But it crept up on you. You weren't actually conscious of being conned into things like that. Because...
That was what, love?
I think it was more word of mouth.
Yeah, you got it from your mates.
All your mates would say these are the best or whatever. And if you were influenced by that, you'd get it at school. And because you were probably in a place where parents had more money, it was more rife, you know, to be looking for stuff. But that wasn't always the kids that got the best stuff. Sometimes the kids that had the best stuff were the people who were the worst off. And it was like a symbol. You had to have something that's what made you, I've got Patrick boots, or I've got such and such, as if it was important. So it's probably almost a partly psychological thing. People thought that's what you were identified as. I've got this, therefore I'm better. And yet the rest of your life wasn't like that. But it took on that importance. It's still there, that this having a brand name for something, that's still there. And as I say, it's not always you see stories on TV, look at the mothers working in 3 jobs and go out and buy their son the best football boots because that's what gave them status. It wasn't important, but it was to provide it for the child and for his standing. It gave them standing, and I think that's still the same to a certain extent.
I mean, I don't remember, the first tennis shoe I remember is obviously the Dunlop Green Flash, but they always made a real squeak.
Yeah.
When you were on the tennis court there.
Yeah, but was that not part of it? Was that not part of the experience of tennis, that squeak? Even when we played badminton, whatever you wore on your feet would squeak about all over the place. But that was the sound of the sport. I always liked white leather. If it was white leather, I would have it.
Yeah.
Not canvas. I liked the leather things because they lasted much longer and they didn't get so dirty. The look of it and the fact that it was more substantial
It would be the same that you would have to wear.
Oh yeah, no, I know it hasn't changed. I mean, we don't play in that gym anymore, but
And wherever you went, if you went to matches and stuff like that, to anywhere, there were strict instructions.
yeah,
I mean, Davy had a lot of badminton matches away
yeah.
where there were strict
But-
instructions. You couldn't have anything that marked the courts. That's
That-
relatively recent, though, isn't it? That trainers are such big business that people would think, I'm going out to that, how can I look smart? Oh, I'll have trainers, you know? That's relatively recent, isn't it? I'm not talking about 2 or 3 years, but that's only come in maybe, was it 10, 15 years even maybe? That
Yeah.
trainers were such... Trainers are the explosion really of fashion, aren't they? There's nothing else has had that effect. That what you wear on your feet, you know, nothing else.
All
You see,
that,
the
I-
thing is, you're actually wearing shoes.
Yeah. Well, that's 'cause-
Younger people to you still. I think the Converse came to you was when you went to Camp America thing. You were Converse then, and it was big things up to here.
Oh, basketball boots. I came
Yeah.
back and then I got a pair of Converse basketball boots when I was at uni
Mhm.
to play basketball in. But yeah, I mean, when I went to the States at 19, everything was branded.
Yeah,
Everything
Yeah.
had a brand on it.
yeah.
I've never seen anything like it. You know, all the shirts with Coca-Cola written all
Yeah.
over it and stuff like that.
We hadn't quite got there yet,
Yeah.
but like everything, we've copied everything the States did. We copied everything that happened in the States. It just came to us a bit later, you know. We saw it as the standard. If it's going on in the States and it's from America, it's great. You copy it. We've always done that. Everything's bigger and better, you know, in the States.
Stupid mutton dummy names
Mm-hmm.
probably came from basketball boots. They were like miniature basketball boots when you look at them these days. So that was the... But I don't know how the name came.
See, the thing is, in those days, that there wasn't the coverage that there is now. There wasn't the camera angles. There wasn't the clarity. There was none of that. So you didn't. There was no close-up slow-mo really, or not so much. There really wasn't the focus.
But I don't think it ever got to the stage that when you looked at the high-class athletes who were in a different ball game to you completely, you thought, I must have what they have. I don't think it ever actually got to that stage, you know. It's
This
I think
company,
today it's still more the look.
brands that are doing everything in our day was specific. It was functional. You have this for your football, you have this for your badminton, you have that for your running.
Mhm.
I mean, we probably had as more footwear then as they probably do now, except it was for specific things.
Yeah.
It wasn't for general lifestyle, leisure. And that's the difference, I think, now with footwear. It's become, everything on the body has become monetized, hasn't it? Even in the 80s, so if you go back to the political backdrop of the 80s, it was under Thatcher, wasn't it? And your mortgage on this house was, I don't know, it's a fortune, wasn't it? I do remember that. You were paying 17%.
15%.
15%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there wasn't much money there wasn't going to be much money to chuck around then either,
Yeah.
was there? You know. So if you think about as that brand thing was coming in the 80s, you were living under 15% interest rate on your mortgage.
Yeah.
You know, that was going to dictate how much money got spent on what, and you're not going to have a new pair of that because
Yeah.
he doesn't fit those anymore. You can have those, you know. So the idea of it, I mean, it all comes down to it's affluence as well. I think the kids now, people are living on credit, they're living on blinking credit cards. The kids now, we would never have crossed our minds to have had a credit card and go into debt to buy a pair of shoes.
It's very commonplace now. I think it's
Yeah, but I think that, yeah.
it's very commonplace for people to still buy things that they think they need and they don't. They think things have to be replaced and
But it all comes down to status, doesn't it?
yeah. Well, the thing is the status of something. You're nobody. I mean, you can't. I remember Celia telling me that when Cameron, this is Celia's eldest grandson, he's at Bristol now, I think. He's a year younger than you. And when he went to school, he was at a private school, and she used to buy his trousers from Tesco's and then cut the labels out Inside in case people laughed at him, you know.